go ahead and broadcast and share this with the followers. Get some people in here. I'm going to turn off Waybot and put on my own music because this is terrible. Hey guys, I am going to not start the show yet. We're going to play another song here from my own music while I get things all set up and we get some people in here. If anybody is willing to share the show out so we can get some people filled up here in this audience, and we go ahead and get all of that shared out to people. I'm going to put that on, not too loud. We're going to populate. We have to do all our show setup just so everybody knows. We have to do it once we're live. There's no pre-pro. There's no pre-setup. So enjoy the music for a second. I'm going to get this fortune cookie fixed. Come on, do it all night. Out on the front porch, baby, swinging. You got me thinking about all that I had. Just come and lay down by my sweetness. You are my weakness, just melting my hand. Grooving, got you feeling alright. It is your body moving. Come on, do it all night. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, hey. Place I know you need this. Wanna be with me all that you can. All right, so here we go. We're going to get started here now. You guys were listening to my lovely husband. Hope that was enjoyable. We're going to get started right now here with the Laughter After. So this show that you're in, my name is Deanna, and you are in the Laughter After Trauma Show. I am a speaker, educator, entertainer, and coach that brings light and lightness to the heavy topic of trauma. I'm a thriver after intimate partner violence, and my journey led me to find beauty and laughter and healing. I believe that we're all magic. We're all capable of being self-healers. And the Laughter After Trauma show here on Fireside, it showcases everyday people who have triumphed in the face of trauma, and they provide hope, awareness, connection, and community, sharing their laughter after. Now, in this process, I want to share that this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And for me, the entire month, we're going to be focusing on men. If you got to see my little reel today, it was all about It's Raining Men. And it's fun, right? So our first guest is Dejan Money Briggs, and we're going to bring him up here in just a second. My computer just turned off, but I'm going to get his bio up here so I can share some information about him if I can actually remember my password. So this is fun because we can't do everything in one place. So we're going to just have some fun here. All right, let's get to it. All right. I don't know. Yes, restore the pages because I have no idea where it went just now. Here we go. All right, good. So Dejan and I met actually in a mastermind that we took together that was hosted by Carmelia Ray, which is somebody that you guys have seen on my show, and Mike Zeller. And they did a mastermind where we went into this with, increasing our visibility and our authority in our arena. So for Dejan, and I hope I'm saying your name right. You can correct me afterwards if I'm not. He he's had some things right in his life, just like everybody else. And we're going to talk about that a little bit in his story. But after leaving his 9 to 5 job to fulfill his purpose, um, he grew his book of business across a bunch of companies to a $10 million in 2 years. So I think that's pretty impressive and it speaks volumes. So he's a business coach that now teaches other entrepreneurs his proven framework and this proven method to make more money through his easy to follow steps. Um, he helps you improve your message and marketing and sales. And I'm not really good at either one of those things. So I probably need to be in your thing. His link that we put here in the fortune cookie is a wait list that you can get on for his upcoming course coaching program, and that's coming up in June. He'll talk some more about that so that I don't mess it up. um, and his mission is to close the wealth gap. um, I guess that's going to be where those 2%ers are. 1%ers or 2%ers. So I'm excited to hear about all of that. So I am, with no further ado, going to ask you to come to camera, and then we are going to get started. So you should just be able to hit that accept button. There you go. And there you go. There you go. And you're not muted. So I hope I didn't
Yeah.
botch that up too much. Do you want me to call you Money, or do you want me to call you Dejan?
Whichever rolls off your tongue easier.
Well, I mean, Money, come on. I think that's indicative. And I like that that is your name across all your platforms. I mean, there is no hiding what you're about. And I think that's perfect, right? I mean, that's the point. So before we get started, I want to, just as a little icebreaker, and I told you about this, but before we even get into the little icebreaker, let's talk about you for a second. Where are you from? Do you have a family? Passions? Talk to me about a little bit of that. The now
Yeah.
Dijon.
Yeah, so where I'm from, it's has a lot to do with my story, right? So I'm from a place called Newburgh, New York, which is the most violent city in the state of New York per capita. And so it has, again, a lot to do with where I am now, how I got here. Essentially, a lot of what I'm going to share today. And when you say, what am I passionate about? Like I said before, I'm passionate about the wealth gap. And the wealth gap being one that is for every dollar a Caucasian has, someone in my community has 9 pennies essentially, and that turns into a litany of things that deals with mental health and that deals with how communities like the one that I grew up with, the traumas that take place in that space, and so like that's going to be fundamental to our story tonight and even to the organizations that I've built. And then about passions, I like to read. I am I'm an introvert. So as much time, like although I'm all over social media and I host events and things like that, I really like to be in silence and to read. I like to read, and so
Okay.
far as
So that
family, go you get
that
it.
that's a, go ahead. Forest family, finish. I'm sorry, finish. Go ahead.
No. So as far as family, I'm actually in a transitionary spot, which again we'll talk through as well. So it's a lot of great
Good.
stuff we're gonna get
Good.
tonight.
Good. All right. Good. So for reading, that was one of my this or that questions. I'll throw that one in there. So are you a book person? Are you an Audible person or a Kindle person?
Um, Depending on what's going on, I prefer a physical book. If I had to stack them in order, I prefer a physical book. I prefer to be sitting or laying down and reading a book. I like to write. I like to highlight, write in the margins, take notes. Audible will be a close second. You know, if I'm traveling, I do a lot of driving, so Audible will be a close second. I can't do the electronic book.
Oh, okay. Well, I do that sometimes just because I feel like I get more out of reading than listening on Audible. Sometimes I
Mhm.
lose my attention. So I'll have some books that I have with I'll put it on the Kindle and pay the $2 or $3 and get the Audible as well. And then I have both, and I can clip notes and stuff like that. But I almost always, with all of those things, still have the physical copy of the
Mhm.
book. And I'm with you. I'm highlighting and everything. I'm reading a book right now that might interest you, and I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called The Emancipation of Evan Walls. Have you heard of
I
it?
haven't.
Okay. So it's really a neat book. I'm not finished, but I'm almost finished. I'm about 80% through of it. It's by an author named Jeffrey Blunt, and it's fictitious but could be real, right? And it's based in the 60s and 70s during the civil rights movement, and it follows this kid through his life, and it's really a neat story. So I'll send you the
I
information
appreciate
because
that.
if you like that, it's something I think that you'll like reading. Um, okay, so let's ask one more this or that question before we get into your stories. Beach or mountain?
Definitely the mountains. 110%
Oh.
the mountains. So I've had the luxury of living in both, right? So I lived in Newburgh is up in the mountains in New York. It's about an hour over Manhattan. I currently live in Hampton, which we have a beach right next to us, which is Buckrow Beach, but we're close to Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I will take the mountains and the scenery of the mountains any day. I don't like the heat, so the trees kind of block the sun out and all that other kind of stuff. So,
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, that's cool. It's nice. It just gives you a little insight into a personality. So that's lovely. All right. So let's get started. So I know you said where you're from has a lot to do with your story. I know some of the key notes that you gave me had to do with childhood trauma and business and the effects maybe or maybe that was an impetus into business. You talked about a little bit about therapy and mentors. So let's get into your story. Tell us, go back as far as you want. Let's hear it.
yeah.
Give us a
So,
start.
yeah. So, like I said, I'm from Newburgh. Again, Newburgh, the most violent city in the state of New York per capita. It is a place that there is not a lot of upward mobility. And without there being a lot of upward mobility, it's essentially, I want to say, a peninsula to itself. So there's no real in or out of Newburgh uh, through a metropolitan transportation system. And I'm kind of rolling this out because a lot of times I feel as if when people see a place that's high with crime rate, they don't understand some of the layers that's behind it, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
if you're in an environment where you don't see opportunity, when you're in an environment where there is no high level of employment and you're looking to survive, then you know the things that are illegal become an option, and not to say that they're the right option, but those are the options of making a means to an end.
Mm-hmm.
And so I grew up inside of that environment. I grew up on a place called Johnson Street, and I was 7 years old the first time I saw someone get shot, right? And
Wow.
so
Okay.
you think about what that does in when you're in development as a
What does it
child.
do? Like, I
Um,
think you need to expound just a little bit, if you don't mind.
no, I don't mind.
If
I
it,
don't mind.
okay, because yeah, expound. I think people need to know, especially people might be listening only to the audio of this. Expound on that a little bit.
Yeah. So what it does throughout life is it it lessens your sensitivity to other traumatic events,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because now you're learning the only way to cope with this trauma is to just live through it. And inside of this community, growing up and particularly during that time, um, therapy wasn't something that was open. I feel like therapy is getting a lot better reputation now than it had in the past. Where if you are in therapy, it's because you're crazy. It's because you're a lunatic. Is we have
Right.
all of these
Right.
notions around it, and so at that age, you don't have access. You don't have an inkling or direction to get that thing. And furthermore, it's just a way of life. And so, you become numb to certain things as it as life progresses.
So I have
Go ahead.
a, a question inside of this question. So when you were exposed to that at age 7 for the first time, so I'm assuming there might be other times you were exposed to this.
Right.
So how was that handled in the adult arena for you, like parent wise or teachers? How was that handled in your realm at that moment in your environment?
Yeah. I don't think that I disclosed that. I don't think I disclosed that I saw it.
Ah,
In that regard, what took place was we lived on the third floor. So I didn't say, "Oh, I saw someone get shot." We lived on the third floor, and I looked down on a corner store. My brother had just walked out, and when I saw this take place, I actually thought it was my brother who had gotten shot.
oh,
And so, you know, I don't remember my mom being home at the time. So the framework around it, I can't tell you, hey, this is what took place. I know that it wasn't something where there was no professional help. As far as mentioning to a teacher, I wouldn't even have thought to do that. I can assure you, a teacher was nowhere on my scope, in that.
yeah. I
Once
guess I
my brother
asked that.
once my brother returned, I think that I may have been more like, oh, okay, that's not my brother. Yeah,
Right. It maybe it almost became like, oh, something that happened on the news. You know what I'm saying? As opposed
right.
to happening to you. And I was just asking that because I know that the way um parents, so for a child it's important to feel safe, right? That is one of the key things that contribute to your mental and emotional well-being is safety, and you need that protection from whatever authority figure is in your life at that time, right? Whether it's your parents, grandparents, whether that comes through schools or mentors, whatever it is, I know that that's a key component. And then it changes the way you are able to assimilate a traumatic
Yeah.
situation. So it's not the event that necessarily causes the trauma, but how you are able to process through it. So that's why I kind of asked that question, just out of
No, beautiful,
curiosity.
beautiful toss up though. So my parents got divorced when I was 2 years old, right? And
Okay.
so for all intents and purposes, I've always had the luxury of two birthdays, two Christmases, two, you know.
Right, right, right,
That's,
right, right.
that's like
So
pro. That's the pro.
yeah, so both parents stayed in your life. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, so both parents stayed in my life. Yeah, and both parents. There's a season, and I'll through this 7 to 12 was a very interesting time for me.
Mm,
But through this time, both parents had their own traumas that they had to deal with,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Some within the relationship, some outside of the relationship, um, and so with that being said, because they're not necessarily getting help with their traumas, it just becomes an inheritance that you may not necessarily want, right? And so now you are in a cycle.
Right. It becomes cyclical, generational. Yes. Right.
Right. Right. And so in that front where you say, support and understanding the foundations of how you deal with trauma, Um, if and I love both of my parents, to life, right? So both
Mm-hmm.
are active in my life. You know, but it does not discount, what we've experienced, and neither both did the best that they could possibly do. And this is one thing that I really feel like people who have had traumatic experiences with their parents, understanding that your parents generally are dealing with their own stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's not to
Mm-hmm.
discount treatment towards you. It is to be empathetic to their traumas, that they have experiences prior to you getting here. They have their own childhood. They have their own. So if therapy wasn't available for me in the 90s, how much less was it available in the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, right?
Mm-hmm.
What
Mm-hmm.
level of treatment was accessible to our parents? And so they've had to go through all of life. We have the benefit of technology. We have the benefit of, being more transparent, the, technology with information, also with connecting and finding community with other individuals. Whereas they had what was directly in front of them, right? And so, being empathetic towards the traumas of your parents, or who or those, and again, I'm going to be very careful here, because I am not telling anyone to accept abuse. I'm not telling anyone to accept these things because you're trying to be empathetic. But what I am trying to communicate is to not allow resentment to build up in that place, to find space inside of you, inside of your heart, to have empathy for another human being that has also been scarred.
So I'm going to pause you here for a second, only because in my 5 keys to, getting through trauma, right? I guess it's not getting through. It's after you've gone through the trauma and you've kind of pulled your way out of it. How do you get back to being yourself? And one of the very first keys that I had to tap into was forgiveness. And people don't really understand what that is. And you basically just described it. It's not about condoning or justifying something. It is more about recognizing that it's for you and letting go of resentment. It's you recognizing that your parents were doing their level best. And I say all the time with my kids, because of what I went through, and this story is not about me, we won't get into it, but because of what I went through, I had to talk to my kids. And I was a little bit concerned about whether or not they would, how they would feel towards me when we got down to talking about it.
Mhm.
Did I not protect them the way I was supposed to protect them?
Mhm.
And they didn't see it that way, thankfully. But it is it is that part of you that's able to say, letting go of the anger and the resentment, knowing that the intentions were at their best. So that's
Yeah,
not condoning abuse, like you said, but I
right.
think that that's a key component, and it is a really good tool for people to understand, to have. You were able to extend grace in a situation where you knew they were doing their best.
Yeah. And so, as you go through life, there's messages that you, and I'm so, as we talk through traumas also have symptoms, right? Are they have, not symptoms, but they have aftershocks. And one of the
Mm-hmm.
aftershocks that my traumatic experiences have caused me to do, because I started, seven was one thing, and then as life goes on, is that, a lot, my mind blocks a lot of information, right? So there's a lot of things in my childhood I just don't remember. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
my sister and my mom could be talking about a situation, like, you remember boom boom boom, or you remember this person, or you remember this situation, and for me it's like, no, I have no clue what you guys are talking about, right? And so as a defense mechanism against the trauma, my memory is kind of shortened. But throughout my life, getting into the chaos, and where I kind of started, um, but that's the environment that I came from. That becomes your normal, though. That becomes your typical. That becomes no different than going to the grocery store picking up milk, scanning it, putting it in a bag, and going home and putting it in the refrigerator. It just becomes a way of life. This is life. And what I really, really hope that people get on from tonight is a few different things. One, when you're looking at someone from an urban community that you are deeming to be a criminal, right? Understand that majority of those individuals are not that by choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
That and people say, well, yes, they're choosing to do that. Yes, it's a choice, but we don't have access to other options, right? So when you fast forward a little bit, and we'll get back to that. And what do I mean by that? So I pretty much came to financial security, prominence, whatever, through the insurance and financial services space, where I'm an investment advisor. I do mortgages. I'm an insurance agent. I own an insurance brokerage. I have people on payroll. I'm 32 now. Through my upbringing, I did not know that this was a career path until I turned 28 years old. Access
Wow.
to this being a career path was not there for me, right? And so when you think about that, what my daily activity looked like, it will almost be like telling a lion, hey, I want you to go and run on concrete. Is concrete a choice for a lion to walk on? Absolutely, it's a choice if the lion has access to the concrete. But in the jungle, concrete is not an option that is known to the lion. I hope this illustration is making sense. So yes, there's options and there's choices that are available to people who have that lifestyle, but it's not an option that they're aware of. Now, with new information, they can make new decisions, they can make new choices. And I want to say that because, again, the things that I found traumatic, now I know that they're traumatic, but then they were just a way of life.
Right, right. You didn't know that you were actually even experiencing or living in trauma.
Right.
And I want to come back to the point of not only did maybe they weren't aware of it, is it possible also that it was simply just not available to
And that's what I mean when
people,
you're not aware of
like you at
it.
the
Mm-hmm.
time? Right. So again, in this book that I'm reading, it just brought up a little point. They take this boy at age 15 to tour a college, and of course they're just coming through segregation or desegregation. So now he's going to this school with white people, and he wants to be educated. So he is rejected by his black community. He's rejected by the white community,
Mm-hmm.
and he's struggling to get through his very formative years. And somebody took him under their wing and brought him to tour this college, which was a black college, an hour and a half from his house. And he's like, where did all these people come from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't, like, he only knows his little community
Absolutely.
and how they were treated. And this world outside of that didn't exist. And, so somebody exposed him to it. But I kind of feel like that's similar to this, right? Like, you find yourself in a situation where it's not just not, you're not just not consciously aware of something, it's not even available to you. And
Correct.
somebody not from outside taking them, so you didn't even know that the career path you were on was a career till you were 28.
Right.
So that's only 4 years
Right.
ago. Am I correct in my math? Okay.
That's very correct. That is very, very correct. So it's only 4 years ago. And so the thing becomes, what if I knew this earlier on, right? How much
Hmm.
more advanced would I be at this point? But yeah, so those are staple things. Then you get into my teenage years, right? So when we get into my teenage years, there's a portion of my life where I just lived with my mom. My father left; he moved to Virginia, and I was just living with my mom. My mom worked two jobs, doing her best to provide, which gave me a lot of time to essentially run wild, and run wild I did. And so now you're compounding abandonment, right? Because my dad left to go to Virginia. He, in his mind, he's like, "Hey, I'm going to find you a way out of this." Now we're in the middle of the separation of parents, right? So now you're also dealing with which parent do I want to stay with? You have court, you have lawyers, you have this, you have that. What's going on in this household? What's going on in that household? And so now you're torn between parents. You have one parent who's 8 hours away. So now you're feeling some level of abandonment, although you don't even realize it's abandonment because this, again, as a child, this is just what life is, right?
Right.
So
We love to say that kids are just so resilient and they adapt easily. No, they don't. They don't know any better. They don't know that they are going through something till later. Yeah, it's yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no. That's the point, right? So now you have these different levels of issues. You have abandonment. You have choosing between parents. And so in this there is a level of chaos you have. There's not consistency. Even in the sense of when my father was in New York, it's Monday at your dad's house, Tuesday at your mom's house, Wednesday at your dad's house, Thursday at your mom's house, with two separate rules. Two separate rules, right? My father is a pastor and very religious. My mother is more of a free spirit. So it's like, hey, you got to be this over here. You got to be this over here. So it's even in the development, there's not consistency. There's not those things add up. And so now we go through our teenage years. I moved from New York. I moved down to Virginia, and now you're dealing with you're dealing with verbal abuse, right? So you're dealing with the questioning of are you good enough? You're dealing with not knowing how to communicate. And this becomes the biggest thing in my life. And I know there's a time limit here, and I'm
It's
laying
no
this out.
time.
Oh, no time limit. Okay. I'm laying
Talk
this
all
out
you want.
I'm laying this out in a way because I want to say, and I'm going to get to my point, but now you deal with not being able to communicate, right? You deal with if you are saying something, your voice not necessarily being heard. You're dealing with not being able to have dialogue, right? More so dictatorship. You're dealing with a lot of these things, and as you deal with these things, you start to, or I, right? I'm saying you, but when I say you, please understand that I'm saying I, and I'll just start saying I. I start to deal with suppressing conversation, suppressing communication, suppressing emotion, and vocalize it, and having healthy dialogue to understand what you said. And instead, it's this anger that's built up because I want to say something, but I don't have the guidance. I don't have the model to say how I feel. So
Right.
vulnerability becomes a mute button. Go ahead. Mhm.
Right. I was going to say, and then if you're in a situation, and Wendy, give me a thumbs up if my volume is better. And if you are in a situation where you are shut down when you try to express that, then that becomes your mode. You learn how to not say stuff because you know that if you say something, it's going to trigger something else. And then you shut down and right, like your communication is just turned off.
Correct.
Mute
Correct. And
mute
so
button. I
now,
like the way that's described.
yeah, yeah. And so now when you get into relationships, that becomes an issue, right? Because it's not that I can't speak well. So here's what I want to say to every person, because people think I think how it's perceived is that just because someone is successful, it means that they don't deal with traumas. It means that they don't still deal with insecurities. It means that they don't still have areas in their personal life that is vulnerable. And so, you know, again, in order to be a top salesperson in the organization that I'm in, so I have a partnership with State Farm, partnership with U.S. Bank, partnership with BlackRock, the largest manager of money in the world, partnership with Rocket Mortgage. The number one mortgage company inside the U.S. State Farm has 19,000 agents across the U.S. My agency is in its top 10% nationwide, right? So in order to do that, in order to lead a team, in order to, run the different platforms that I have, we do a networking meetup that attracts entrepreneurs, 125 a month generally. I own a second company where we do bookkeeping, tax preparation, human resources, marketing, right? All of that takes a level of conversation. I have a history in ministry being a public speaker, right? So I put all of that together, and you say, man, this guy speaks well. He's a great orator. He has to be someone who could communicate well. I can talk about concepts very well, but you put me in a personal relationship to talk about emotion, and I don't know how to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know how to tell someone, hey, I'm feeling like this. Because
Mm-hmm.
when feelings come up, it's always, oh man, I don't know what to do with this until it's at a place where it's almost like it's lashing out, right? And so this is something that recently came up that I had to go through, and I had to realize that there's triggers that I took place. So I talked about, the first time I saw someone get shot. I went through a year, through a 2 year period maybe, to where almost every 6 months, someone that I knew, I was close to, wound up dying. I had a friend who I grew up with, again, product of our environment. I'm grateful that I was able to be taken out of that environment, or I would have been had the same result as him. But he went to jail for robbing a bank. He was about to come back home. He wound up dying of a heart attack right before he came home. Right. Go
Mm-hmm.
6 months later, I had a cousin that was killed by Richmond police. He was killed. He was butt naked. They put him on the news butt naked. He was a crazy
Mm-hmm.
man that was on a highway that was killed. A few months later, after that, another childhood friend of mine was killed. He was shot in the head in a robbery. A few months after that, a grandmother figure of mine died from cancer. A few months after that, another friend of mine that was close to me just suddenly passed away. I mean, these people are all 30 years old and younger, with the exception of this grandmother figure. A few
Mm-hmm.
months after that, a friend was riding on a motorcycle. Was I guess there was some level of cops got involved some way, and a cop pushed the motorcycle off. He wound up dying. A friend of mine wound up committing suicide, shot himself in the head.
Mm-hmm.
So I have all of these losses in this short period of time, but all of these losses are almost like another day, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
experienced this first one when I was 7 years old.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm at a position to where I understand that there's loss, right? But
But you
and what
just
my
think it's the
body,
way life goes.
it's just the way life goes, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so again, then there's the emotion communication side, right? So now it's like
Mm-hmm.
I even if my mind is blocking out there's this disconnect. There is there is still a subconscious awareness of the pain that is there. Now, on
Definitely.
the other side of that is that all of these things are taking place as my business is growing. With each and
Mm.
every time I'm opening a business, these things are taking place. So I'm literally in moments where I'm experiencing the best of my life concurrently with the worst of my life.
Wow.
And now you get into a conversation of survivor's guilt, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the survivor's guilt is, man, that should have been me. Why did I make it out? That could have been me. Why wasn't that me? Now you have a whole other element to where your success is almost um, further imprisonment for you, because it's a realization that you wound up making it to a place, to an age, to an economic status that others that you love and care for don't have access to, right?
Right. Hmm. So, real quick in that section is that, is this becoming part of the thing that makes you want to mentor people and show them that they have the choices available?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, which is why I love entrepreneurship, which is why for
Right.
all that we talk about America being a capitalistic environment and system, when executed properly, it is an opportunity for upward mobility. I don't. If we were in a caste system, I would never be here talking to you, right? If we were in the caste system, the likelihood would be that you would not know who I was unless I was on your nightly news channel, either as someone that had committed a crime or someone whose family was mourning and who was saying he was just with us yesterday. He was such a great guy. He was X, Y, and Z. That would have been, if we lived in a caste system, that would have been the reality of the introduction that we would have had, right?
Mm.
But because we live in a country that allows us to move up, that allows us to exchange value for dollars, then yes, it gave me the opportunity. Then it says, man, because I have this opportunity, I was now able to take my sister off her job, and she runs our tax preparation and bookkeeping side. My best friend, who is a co-founder in a lot of these businesses, he does our marketing space. They're the individuals who work inside of my insurance agency. They're individuals who, majority of them I've known over 10 years. They would never have access to the opportunities they have working now that I'm able to provide, the trainings that we do, the community events that we do. Over the last 2 years, we've given back about $200,000 a year to the Black community, whether that's through payroll, nonprofit organizations just supporting other Black businesses. Those are things that give opportunity because, again, where we started this all from was the lack of access or availability to resources to make better decisions. So now that I'm at a point that I can speak to that and that I can influence that, of course I want to do that, and I want to educate others how to do that. And
Mm.
you know the down. So again, there's this duality because it's great here, but if trauma goes unchecked, if trauma goes unchecked, um, it will be a so the same. Here's a better way to say it. The same fire that cooks your meal can also burn your house down, right?
Right.
That
Right.
uncontrolled, untamed, um, unfiltered, unadulterated flame can do damage if you don't check it. And so that's where you kind of get into therapy, right? That's where you get into,
Mm.
okay, I'm seeing a pattern in personal relationships that the variable, the constant variable is me, right? Other variables could change, other temperaments can change, other things can change, but there is something where the outcome is always this. And since the
Mm-hmm.
outcome is always this, I have to look at me as the variable. And when you are a successful individual, you could think that just because you're great in one area, it automatically means that you're great in all areas, right? So when we look at Michael Jordan was a phenomenal basketball player, the greatest basketball player of all time, right? And you would think that just because there was a ball involved, that if there's a ball involved, Michael Jordan is going to be the best. Until he picks up a baseball bat, right? And it's like, no, 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 no. That greatness is restricted to this area. right? And then Michael
Mhm.
Jordan's a
Mhm.
basketball owner, right? He owns a basketball team. His basketball team has never been a good basketball team. You would think the greatest basketball player of all time would have a great basketball team, a championship caliber basketball team. No, 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 no. That's not his, as Michael would say, his zone of genius, right? So
Right.
we can
Right.
think that a
Mhm.
public figure, because they're great in this public place, or you could drink your own Kool-Aid or drink your own wine and get intoxicated on all of the accolades that come about, and not deal with that just because you're great in one sphere does not mean you don't need help in
Mhm.
another. And that's a level of self-awareness a lot of us have to take, no matter the economic status. And that's where therapy is great, right? To have the safe place to unload some of these things, and to walk through some of the things and talk through some of these things, and to learn how to deal with a lot of these things.
So, how does the now that everybody has everything's so accessible now,
Mhm.
and so now that that is the case, I think light is being shown on a lot of topics that in the past may have been swept under the rug. And
Mhm.
I do think that mental health for men in particular has been a topic that has been a little bit, like, oh, buck up, man up, do what you got to do, blah, blah, blah. Whereas now we're seeing things like the NFL coming forward to emphasize, hey, you need to take care of this. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of your mental health, your emotions, and not bottle this stuff up. Or you see people like Simone Biles in the Olympics who decides, hey, you know what? I am on overload right now and I just can't. So I'm not.
Mhm.
And she made that decision. And it's respected now as opposed to being, whatever stereotype might have been put around it in the past. Does that help when it comes? I'm not a man. Says that help? That's why I wanted to interview guys, right? Does it help when it comes to seeing that publicly for you to be able to say, "Hey, good, you know what? I can reach out for help," and it allows you a little more, I don't know. I don't want to call it freedom, but you know what I'm saying.
Absolutely,
It just opens a door.
definitely freedom. Yeah, I think it's a few things. One is I think it gets back to what we talked about earlier, which is accessibility, right?
Mhm.
So number one is
Mhm.
even just having the thought that it's okay, because once that seed is planted in your mind and it germinates, it could turn into fruit through your action. But if you don't even know that it's a possibility, that it's never there. Then once you have the thought that is there, it's the acceptance of it being there, right? A lot of times,
Right.
in our community, and maybe through other communities, and I just haven't explored, and maybe you could share. But in our community, there's this thing where what goes on in this house stays in this house, right? Meaning,
Right. Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So even in that, when you think through therapy, it's almost like your training was almost to not share. So now that you have others who are saying, "Hey, I do talk to someone. They do help me. They help me to see life in a different way." Again, my community, it became a bigger discussion maybe about where maybe about 2015, 2016, Jay-Z, who is someone in our community who is looked up to because of his level of success.
Right. He's influential. Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
he's
Mhm.
an influential individual, and so he had an album called 444, and in it he says, my therapist said I probably relapse. I said prehaps. Like, so even that one line where he says my therapist said I probably will relapse, right? And he's talking through infidelity and things of that nature, right? That opened up
Mhm.
a whole conversation Because if he is saying that he has a therapist and he's a billionaire and he's made it from the same environment that I made it from, the same things that I saw, he saw, the same traumas and tragedies I experienced and I witnessed, he witnessed, and he's lived through this trajectory of life that is, so vast. If he's able to say my therapist, like those four words were like breaking the glass windows or shattering the glass ceiling to mental health for our community. To have someone say that. And so what does that do? Yes, it definitely makes it more accepted. And then, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show so much, because I feel like people sometimes isolate themselves in thinking that they are experiencing something very different than somebody else. And we do all process and experience our traumas differently, but in the end of the day, we are the same. Like, I just feel like at the end of the day, we all want the same things fundamentally, and we are the same. And so when you see somebody else go through a situation and talk about how they handled that, it allows you to go, oh, okay, well, if he can, I can. And when people listen to this show, watch this show, whatever, they can look at you and they can say, oh, if he can, I can.
Absolutely.
Because you're being open and honest and having this conversation right here. I don't care men, if it's men under 30 who are listening to this, if they're in the Black community and they need to understand this because of the environment that they're in, if they didn't know that they could have access to this, whoever, wherever, whatever. I think more and more the world is coming together saying we need the connection in the community so that we can understand that we're all in this together, and that if one of us can get through it, that means, like, we might look up to the Jay-Z's of the world, but I think people will look at me and go, well, if she can, I can. Just
Absolutely.
whatever.
Absolutely, because that's like a lateral thing, right? So looking up to whoever. Some people it's Warren Buffett. Some people it may be Elon Musk, right? And that's just based off of our culture, right? Whoever, whatever
Right.
culture you're in, you're gonna have somebody that you're looking up to that I may not even be remotely aware of. I'm sure that there is somebody in the farming industry that a farmer is like, and I don't even know who that person is. I don't even know their name, but a farmer
Right.
definitely knows who that person is with the biggest farm in the US and how much, chicken they make and how much wheat they produce or whatever the case may be, right? So I'm saying that to say cultures
Right. Right.
have their own thing, and that's a vertical thing. But then there is, I think, an even more powerful thing is a lateral, right? Something
Right.
that is on our same wavelength. And the reason I was so excited about doing this and why, since the first time we've met, that I've always gravitated toward you is because we have our backgrounds are so vast. There's a huge chasm, I'm sure, between how you grew up and how I grew up. What you experienced, for the most part, and what I experienced, whatever those may be. However, at the end of the day, it's the warmth and the genuine concern and passion you have as a human being, right? And that
Right.
is the beauty of this, regardless of everything else, right? We have emotions, you know, and suppressed emotions come out in a different way for different people. But to understand that you don't have to suppress those emotions, and to understand again that you aren't alone. You aren't alone.
Right. And I think that for anybody who's listening to this to understand that, so how we met, and I want anybody in the audience, feel free, we're going to get this to a point where if you guys have questions and want to come up and ask, feel free to raise your hand. But how we met was in this mastermind. I didn't know you before that. I didn't, anything. We wound up yeah, I don't know if I would call it stuck, but we wound up put together in a situation where we had to go through our little list, our exercise that we were doing. And it was, we were teamed up. And it was one of the most interesting and revealing things, I think, for both of us to learn this stuff about each other and what your goals were, where you've been, the things you've accomplished, being able to kind of just even write those things out and go, hey, what? And go, yeah, your mission is amazing. And it doesn't matter. I probably grew up in, we weren't very well off at all because my mom had 6 kids. You can't be well off in that situation, very rarely. Um, but I mean, we got by, but we also didn't live in a community that was suppressed. And I think that some people, especially for you, the Black community and that culture sometimes starts out in a community that is suppressed. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Snoop Dogg, right?
Right.
Or whoever. You know what I mean? It is a part of this culture that we are trying to change. I get that. But change is so slow. And so, yes, I mean, there's probably big differences. I did not ever see anybody get shot. I didn't ever in my life. And so I don't know that. But I had traumas in my later life, in my marriage, and things like that. So I do know how to relate to it. And I have a lot of empathy for it because I don't care which situation you're in. I feel like there are not a lot of programs out there for helping people after the time of impact.
Mhm.
So lots of organizations out there want to help you right when something happens. And there's not a whole lot afterwards when you're going through different phases of your life. So now you're a 30-year-old, 32-year-old man looking at this from a different angle, and you're looking for the help, and you sought that help and you got that help. When you get married, you're going to see it differently and you might seek that help. When you have kids, you're going to see it differently and you might seek that help. And so you have access now
Mhm.
to the therapy, but there's still so many people across lots of different cultures that do not have access to private therapy that focuses on their particular needs. And so it's still just such a vast thing that needs to be done. One of the bigger missions I would like to accomplish before I die, which I'm
You're
running out of
definitely
time.
gonna do it. You're definitely
But
gonna do it. You have a supporter in me. So yes,
there you go.
absolutely.
So, but I would love to have any of you guys. So let me go through the audience real quick and just say who's here. Peter, Jamie. Jamie is my daughter, Dejan. So
Hey
she's down in the
Jamie.
audience. Woody, who I think is a fireside bot who likes to, just pop in on shows every now and then. Dawn, Tony, our ever loving weight bot, Truthful Sweet. She shows up a lot, so I enjoy having you here. Thanks for always showing up. And we had a couple people that have popped in and out. Oh, did I mention Peter? Peter is one of my guests on my future shows this month. So he's going to be right here in your seat later on in the month. So he's one of my men that it's raining. So I don't know if any of you guys would like to come up. If you guys have any questions for Dijon, me, want to share anything, all you have to do, I think, you have a little plus button um, on the screen. Um, or you can comment and I can invite you because I think you have a plus button on the screen. Or if not, it's in your hamburger, which is that little double line down there on the bottom left, which will allow you to invite yourself or ask yourself to speak. Because I'm not really sure how they see it now that I'm hosting. I think the screen is different.
So,
But anyway, so moving forward, Dijon, Jamie's coming up. Hey, Jamie. Real quick, before I let you say something, Jay, um, moving just real quickly from all of that, you now are where you are. What's your future look like? What's your future?
man, our future is radically changing um, our community through providing individuals access to entrepreneurship, right? And so, right now, like I said, we have one of the State Farm's large top sales agencies in the country. So we'll be doing a second agency next year. We'll be doing a mortgage brokerage this year. Then we're really getting into taking the systems, the frameworks, the methodologies that I've learned and providing other individuals with those same systems, methodologies, and frameworks. And so I'm doing a business course coming up here in June, which is be a
Is that what's in the link?
yeah, that's what's in the link. That's
Okay.
what is in the link. So for those who are just joining in, I took my company from $0 to a $10 million book of business in a 2 year period across all of my companies. And so there's a systematic way that I've done that. And I'm sharing that with other individuals. I'm actually in my second office, which is the Greenwood office now. And so there's a way that we've done that, that we've taken the most potent information we have, and we put it into this course, and that's what we're going to be revealing and unlocking on June the 4th.
Awesome. Awesome. So if you want to get access to that, guys, this little um, scroll next to the fortune cookie that you see underneath the pictures, that is where the link is. If you click into that, you're able to click the link. It's live. You can go to the site and do whatever it does.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie, I'm going to let you on mic. I'm going to welcome Deborah. Welcome to the show. Jamie, you can go ahead and on mic if you had a question, comment, whatever.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to say that it really rang true for me when you said that when you start to experience success later in life, how, oh, of course I lost my thought because I'm trying to deal with kids and listen at the same time. Wait, it's going to come back to me.
Take your time.
No, because I had it. I was hanging on to it the whole time. And then I was like, I want to mention this. It was, about experiencing success later in life and feeling that, like almost kind of trapped in that too, and feeling like, okay, I had this. How come other people who went through something similar didn't achieve this? And almost kind of feeling
Like a survivor's remorse type of thing.
Survivor's guilt is what they call it.
Yes, yes. And so when you said that, I was like, oh, interesting. And we, of course, all experience success in different ways, but yeah, that I like that you mentioned that because it's something that I hadn't given much thought to.
Yeah. And I'll amplify that thought too, because with my traumas now, my traumas have also they also have contributed to my success. So there are things that I do that are actual strengths. So I am super detailed and organized in certain areas of life because I don't like the invariability of life. I don't like the unknown. So I'm detailed in certain areas because of that. Right. So go ahead.
So, are you able to find gratitude in all of the things that you went through in the sense that not that you have to be happy that they happened, but that you were able to pull the lessons and grow from those things that you went through?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said, I have a ministry background. So there's certain concepts that, come from my faith that I draw on. One being this idea that the wheat grows with the tares, right? So good comes up with the bad, right? It rains on the just and the unjust. And so some things are a part of life. There's this one concept that I really, really draw on a lot. It's Romans 8:18, which says your present sufferings are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in you. And when I think about that, it's pretty much just saying like any level of hurt or hardship you have at some point later on in life gets so good that you don't necessarily focus on that. And this is a key. I can't overemphasize this key enough. You manifest whatever you magnify, right? And so if I magnify just the trauma, just the hurt, just the pain, and I wallow in it and I think about it and I'm dreaming about it, and it becomes quicksand that just pulls me down. But if I also magnify that these situations showed and exemplified internal strength, internal fortitude, an ability to overcome. So now when I get into business becomes so easy because Heck, when I was 7, someone got shot, right? And I saw it. This is nowhere on that scale of difficulty in processing, right? The
Right.
ramifications for this is nowhere near what I've already experienced. It's actually very small in comparison, right? So those things help as far as taking risk. What's more risky than illegal activity as a preteen, right? So, in the sense of business risk, I don't see risk the same way a lot of other people see risk. And
Yeah.
so there are
Yeah.
things that it helped to shape and it helped to mold and it helped to develop, and those are my things. But everybody has their things of what was hard. If we had an opportunity to write our story out, we all would have erased certain chapters if we had the opportunity to do it before we experienced it. But after we went through it, it did show internal strength. It showed that you have the strength, you have the ability, you have the capacity to do hard things, to overcome hard things. And those are the things that you have to magnify. Those are the things that you have to amplify that strength.
And I
And
think
those
that
are the things.
I was just going to
Go
say, I
ahead,
think
Jay.
that magnification is part of the reason why some people who are around, people who are trauma survivors, so to speak, they don't think that of you because you have made that choice and that trajectory in your life. So like lots of good stuff for me to chew on. I like it.
Yeah. And I mean,
Yeah, and
you're so good, Jamie. Jamie, you're so good. Go ahead, Deanna.
I think that's where your character is built, right? This is where the fire, this is another scriptural thing. The fire, you're tested by fire. And
Right,
this is where the fire tests you, refines you, and then you come out refined on the other end.
right,
You have to experience the fire. And it's not because it's necessarily put on you. Scripturally speaking, if you want to get into scripture, time and unforeseen occurrence, that happens.
right.
But even though it does happen, you can still tap into your faith and be refined by that fire. And I feel like that's something you did beautifully with your life, and you're exemplifying that. And I think the way you take it into your community also is amazing, because you are able to show it by example, but then also pull people along with you,
Yeah,
which I think for everyone is part of your purpose in life. I don't care who you are, is to connect and lift and bond and lift people up as you can, wherever it's possible for you to be able to do that.
yeah. And
That's
so
just my
tying what
opinion.
you and Jamie just both said, both here, what Jamie said was great because it means that we need to be kind to every person we encounter, regardless of what their
Mhm.
social status looks like. Because just because they appear to be does not mean that they don't have underlying traumas that they're still dealing with, right? And it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
they don't have triggers that they're still dealing with, because it is an ongoing process. How do you know if you're healed until you're in a position where you're hurt again? How do you
Right.
know if you,
And
God,
truthfully, healing is never, it's not there's no end in it. That's why it's got the ing on the end of it. You're not a healed ed, you're healing. It is an ongoing process, because you can't erase or eliminate the traumas that you have experienced. And so even though you might be able to process through them, they're going to come up in different ways, like I said, in all these different phases. And healing is what you're doing on an ongoing basis, or an ongoing process. So
yeah,
yeah, I agree with that.
yeah, and so with that, you have to, one, as an individual now, we're going through the healing kind of thing, is identifying what are my triggers, right?
Mhm.
What are the
Mhm.
things that cause me to have particular responses that I need to be aware of? And before I respond after an encountering a trigger, what is the desired outcome? Because a lot of times it is our minds through our traumas that is painting the actions of others. Meaning,
Mhm.
you can say something and mean no harm by it, but my experiences connect that tone, that sentence structure, that phrase, word positioning. It connects it to something that makes me defensive because subconsciously it's like there's vulnerability, there's hurt, there's pain. You have to protect yourself. And now you're in a position where you're defensive towards someone who did not have the intent to offend you to begin with. But if you're not
Right.
aware,
And
you don't know.
right. And so Brene Brown brings this out really well. She says, before you respond, especially if you recognize it as a trigger, but maybe you don't even recognize it as a trigger, but before you respond, when you feel like you might be angry or responding in a certain way or mistaking something, ask yourself the story I'm telling myself. What is the story I'm telling myself? Even use those words, which I've done with clients, and I've helped clients say this before you come at somebody and say, well, every time you do this, every time, and blah, 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 right? Most people can't even remember what their fights are about when you're dealing with, relationships and couples or any kind of interpersonal relationship. You know, they have a hard time remembering what the fight was about, right? Is it really about the toothpaste? Because I doubt it.
Right.
So, but something happens and you told yourself a story and then you reacted to the story that you told yourself. And that might not have anything to do. Your story might be accurate, maybe, but 9 times out of 10, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you approach a person and say, hey, the story I'm telling myself is that you don't care about the fact that I had this long work day. All you're worried about is there's no food in the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
When somebody opens the fridge and says, oh, there's nothing to eat in here, which is a simple comment. That doesn't mean I expect you to feed me. That doesn't mean I'm complaining about you didn't go to the grocery. It doesn't mean any of those things. But in somebody's head, it will automatically trigger that. And you get, so that's exactly what you said. It becomes this defensive story. It's a story you're telling yourself. And we create these stories around our experiences when the other person we're interacting with oftentimes doesn't know our experience or haven't even experienced what we've experienced.
Right.
They don't know.
Right.
Jamie said a comment too. She said, yes, you never know what fire they walk through to be where they are. Yes, thank you for sharing. Right. So that was from a little bit ago. Okay. So welcome, Rocksteady. Welcome, Deborah. Welcome, you guys. If you guys have anything you want to add, jump in, join the conversation. You're more than welcome to jump on the stage. I do have a 9 o'clock show because we're doing our Depp Heard. We're really, really having fun going through the Johnny Depp trial. It's been fun and interesting. So, so Peter, welcome to the stage. Tell us what you have. You have a question, a comment here?
I do. Uh,
Go for it.
Dijon, you're such an inspiration. Deanna, too, like this last 20 minutes has been like chock full of inspiration. I love, magnify what you want to manifest. I've never heard that before. And I mean, those 3 words, magnify what you want. Maybe it's 5 words, I don't know. But anyway, I got a question for you, Dijon. I
Yeah.
missed the first half hour of the show, so I hope I'm not repeating something that's been said. But you pulled yourself up. You've got so much going on. You got this like you're teaching this thing coming up. You're pulling up other entrepreneurs. How do you own your power? Like how do you live in that power without second guessing yourself? Like always forging ahead.
Um,
Good question.
that is a great question. I would
Where's the
say,
self confidence come from?
yeah. So here's another one of those things where it is very possible that it's an extension of my trauma, right? Because the ambition could be just a desire to want to be accepted, right? When you go through abandonment, you go through hardships, you go through different things of that nature, right? That could definitely be that. But how do I do it? I don't. I live each and every day. We get in some of my philosophies, my core values, IAOO, being intentional, right? So being efficient, making the most of my time. What am I doing from 1 hour to the next? Being appreciative, being grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunities that I have. I'm grateful for the life I get to live. Being opportunistic, making the most of my opportunities, being effective, and then being obsessive with self actualization. Like, I understand that success does not happen by accident. I understand that the life that I want to live is not something that's going to happen by accident. So each and every day, how do I get better? And so, how do I own that power? It's not something that I think about. At this point, it is just a way of life. It is just what I wake up and I get to do. How do I add value to others? How do I make the world a better place? But again, I want to tie it back to the truth of the matter, which is these things are things that I learned, that I developed, that my trauma gave me the power to do. And if they're not checked well, if they're not balanced, I can overgive. I can do too much in the sake of. So I also have to be aware, and I'm learning more now to be aware of, is this healthy or is this a trauma response? Because the accolades are great, the effort is great, but now that's the conversation that I'm in this space now, which is, how much is this for acceptance? Because it's going to benefit the community one way or the other, but how much is it? How much is it coming from you from a healthy place? I hope I
Right. I love
answered,
that.
Peter.
Well, did you find, and Peter, I muted you. You can unmute whenever you want to talk. I just was hearing a little bit of background noise. Um, the other thing is, what I was thinking of is, coming from where you were in the culture you were, did you feel a sense of urgency, this sense of, I have to make this happen and I have to make this work because I'm not going this cycle? Because I really do feel like that's part of a trauma response in a good way, but yes.
Yeah, so I feel the onus and the responsibility to take care of those who are connected to me. I feel the onus and responsibility to not only, when I look at how I make decisions, um, I have higher levels of empathy because of where I went through. So with my teammates, right? I'm an employer who, man, if you got to leave because your kid is, or your child is sick, or you have, nobody is home to babysit your child, and so you have to leave, I'm not going to fire you over that, right?
Right.
I'm going to be more lenient and say, hey, go ahead, take care of your kids. If you can make the hours up, great. Your check's not going to change that much because I've experienced that. But I feel that responsibility. I feel the responsibility that what I am doing has to work because there's so many other lives that are connected to it. And so, with that in mind, again, yes, those are things that, because of what I witnessed, I don't want other people to witness or to experience that. Um,
Right.
Again, it's a two-sided coin though, because that also could get into people pleasing, right? And when you get into
Mhm.
relationships, there's different levels of attachment. And I recently learned this. So, if you are in a relationship, there's like attachment styles that are responses from your childhood traumas. And so now this is
Mhm.
like something else you got to think through, so.
Right. And the thing is, you don't have to overthink all of it. I mean, honestly, the awareness and just the knowing allows you to process through some of this. Some people have this need or responsibility from a childhood, knowing that um, certain aspects of your life were not, or needs were not met, feeling the responsibility to make sure that's met for you, your people, whether that's your relations or your community, or however it is done, or probably done in levels, in concentric circles moving out from you. That is, it's good, and like you said, until it's not good. And so you really do have to just kind of keep it in check. You don't want to be, um, like you said, a people pleaser or an enabler. So as long as you're able to keep yourself cared for, in the process of that, I think that you're always going to be okay, because that's where the balance is. And that's where I bring up so much about self care. People, it's not about the fluff, it's not about the spa days. I'm not saying it can't be a spa day. What I'm saying is, are you taking care of yourself? Or are you giving yourself the same attention and care that you give to the people that you love? And so those people that you feel responsible for, and you take on this stuff and you go for it and you do these things and you have this confidence, as long as you turn around and you do that for yourself as well, then I think you're going to be in a good and balanced place, because you're not going to do it to your detriment.
Right.
That's my take. I don't
Yeah.
know if you agree with that, but
Yeah.
that's my
No.
take.
No. I agree with that. Here's a part of the issue though. You have to set boundaries, and for
Right.
somebody
Exactly.
who's looking to who has that abandonment thing, boundaries are hard to accept. Are hard to not hard to accept, but they're hard to surrect. Right? Boundaries are hard to
Mm-hmm.
build up when you're looking for someone to accept, right? And so
Right.
now you just have to be mindful to set up boundaries, to erect boundaries, and to also hold boundaries, and to know that every relationship, business or personal, is not intended to be perpetual. That there are certain
Right.
relationships that are temporary, and although those relationships are temporary, it is not a it could be a reflection of you, which you have to be mindful of, but it's not always because of you. There's certain things just run its course. But again, those are
Right.
things that therapy helps you to go through. Therapy helps you to see,
Right.
hear other people's story. And I'll leave this last thing too for anybody who is in a position of, you're on the brink of success, you're experiencing success. The thing that I'll also be mindful is, be mindful when you're dealing with a survivor's remorse. Be very keen and very aware of subconscious self sabotage. Right? Be very
Mm-hmm.
aware of the things that you do to create your own barriers to your blessings. Right? To create your own pits to your prosperity. Be aware and be mindful of the things that you do that push you back, you know?
Right. A lot of times, because you feel yourself coming into a place that you really have wanted for a long time but never made it there, it is very easy for you to get into that place, into that mindset that you were just describing. And it becomes a self sabotaging thing. And it also becomes a perpetual cycle that, if you're not aware of it, you don't, you know, it's something, like I approach it as a blocker, right? Fear, anger, shame or guilt, self sabotage, laziness, these things block you. If you're not bringing them into awareness, calling them out, and moving through those, then you are staying in a place of chaos or a place of crisis, because you're never actually working through those things that have blocked you. And I mean, that's just a couple, there's so many. Um, but I love that you bring that up. The self sabotage is, yeah, it's legitimate. So I appreciate the end note there. um, Let me read the last comment here. Speaking to my soul, what's the intent behind your actions? Is it to prove that you are enough? Totally agree that balance and checking in with yourself is essential. Perfect. Yes. So, and Peter said it was a great answer. It looks like he had a bounce, but good answer to his question about where the confidence comes from. So, I want to thank you so much, Dejan, for just coming on today, sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, sharing your resilience and your hope, and how you work through the traumas that you went through growing up and just persisted and turned it into what you do now. I think you are an amazing example of what a person can do, a person can accomplish. So I appreciate you coming on here and sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. And, hopefully this isn't the last time. I really enjoy being up here. And so thank you.
Oh, absolutely not. So I only do this once a week, so it tends to, but I mean, hey, you never know what it's going to turn into, and I will totally love to have you back. And who knows what shows I might be adding, right? Right now, I'm doing a show every night at 9 o'clock to just talk about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So it's just I feel like it's in my wheelhouse because it's talking about domestic violence and
Yeah.
intimate partner violence. And I do feel like even though I'm chuckling about it, I think there's a bigger message than worrying about his defamation that's out there that's being brought up. And again, we're talking here mental health awareness month and understanding that these things, even intimate partner violence, it impacts men. Statistically speaking, it is about equal. And that's just what's known and what's reported. And really, more often, it's initiated by women, but women just tend to be injured and harmed more often. So the dynamic is very complicated, but I think all of it's dirty laundry. But I think bringing it out, and you can't heal what you don't approach. You just have to bring it to the surface, and that way you can move through it. So hopefully some healing happens over there at some point in time, but I like the fact that the awareness is coming up about all of it. So all right, well, with that, I think we're going to wrap up the show. I see you down there, Chris. I thank you for popping in. We're about to end here, but by all means, come back to the show with me and Wendy if you guys want to jump in. We will be back here next week. Rocksteady, who's in the audience, he is my guest next week. It's going to be an hour later because he is in Australia. So we have issues with time zones. So, but I want to say for sure, Dejan Money Briggs, I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight. And I like to say to all my guests that, I see you and you are beautiful. I really do. I think you're a beautiful individual. And let's do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you,
All
Deanna.
right. Okay. I am going to put on some music and move people off of the stage and close out the show. You guys have a great rest of the evening, unless I see you in 30 minutes, and then we'll chat soon.
Got you feeling alright. Where is your body moving? Come on.